So when I was 16 years old, my dad lived out in Apache Junction, Arizona, and I went out to visit and spent the summer with him and got to know a little bit about the area and the Superstition Mountains and all the folklore around it, and was always intrigued by it. And certainly, like a lot of other people, I got very interested in the Lost Dutchman Goldmine. I always thought it was a very fascinating story, and I love the folklore and legends like this, and I can see how it consumes people wanting to find the gold. So after spending the summer in Apache Junction when I was 16 years old, I didn't return again until I was 47, which was 2 years ago. I'm 49 now. My wife, who I met in Alabama, her family, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, live in Apache Junction. So I've had a recent opportunity to get out and visit Apache Junction and see the mountains again, which has been really cool for me. And of course, it has renewed my interest in the Lost Dutchman Goldmine. So I started watching a lot of YouTube videos on everything that had anything to do with the Lost Dutchman, and reading stories and going online and doing some research. And I come to find out that there's so many people that have different opinions about whether there is gold or not, where it came from, whether the Dutchman had a mine or not, and a lot of people claiming to know where it's at. And I kind of started being a skeptic. I was thinking, well, maybe this guy may have had some gold, but is there a mine? How could there be a mine and nobody find it over this amount of time? It's probably just a story that has just gotten bigger and bigger over time. But I have become convinced that there is a Dutchman gold mine in the Superstitions. And I think that what really put me over the edge was hearing the story that was told by Clay Worst. And Clay Worst would tell you that the story he tells is not his story, and it's not his version of the story. But it's the story, he is telling the story of people that he knew, and the people that he knew that had the most direct knowledge of what the Dutchman described before he died. There is the Dutchman himself, Jacob Walsh, the Dutchman, who died in 1891 in Phoenix, Arizona. The Dutchman was a very private man and did not talk about his personal affairs with many people. But on his deathbed, 2 people were present when he spoke of his gold and told the story of the mine. One of them was Gideon Roberts, who was as old as the Dutchman and died not long after the Dutchman did. And the other was Dick Holmes. Dick Holmes was a younger man, and he heard the story right from the Dutchman's lips on about the gold and how to find it. Dick Holmes searched for the gold mine for 16 years, not ever able to find it. And then when he got too old to hunt, he sent his son out, Brownie Holmes, to find the gold. And he spent 40 years in the Superstition Mountains looking for the gold in the Lost Dutchman Goldmine. And this is where Clay Worst comes into the picture. Clay Worst was really good friends with Brownie Holmes. They spent 20 years being the best of friends. And Brownie Holmes told Clay Worst, he said, "I don't know if the Dutchman was lying to my father or not, but I know my father didn't lie to me, and I'm not lying to you about the story the Dutchman told." They were so close that when Brownie Holmes died in 1980, Clay Worst took his ashes out into the middle of the Superstitions and erected a headstone out there and carved with a hammer and chisel his name into a headstone and put his ashes around the headstone. Obviously, very close friends. So I'm going to try to tell the story that Clay Worst told. I'm going to paraphrase. There's no way I can do it the justice that he did. But here it goes. We start off with Jacob Walsh. Jacob Walsh was born in 1810 in Germany. immigrated to the United States in 1839. He followed gold stories to North Carolina, to Georgia, to California during the 49er era, always looking for gold. He made it to Arizona Territory in 1863. He followed gold rushes, but usually getting there after good ground had already been covered. After giving up in Prescott, he moved to Phoenix, Arizona in 1868. He had become a farmer and had given up on his dreams of finding gold. We got to back the story up a little bit now. In 1865, Dr. Aaron Thorne, who was loved by the Indians, I believe he saved an Indian's life. The Indians blindfolded Dr. Thorne and took him into the heart of the Superstition Mountains. They showed him more gold there than he could even dream of. The Indians said that he could take as much gold as he could carry. Being clever, he took off his long underwear, tied the legs, and filled them with gold ore. Then tied the waistband and put it over his horse. And then they blindfolded Dr. Thorne and took him back to Fort Mitchell, where they took the blindfold off. After this, Dr. Thorne bankrupted himself trying to find the gold that the Indians had shown him. He failed to find it. In 1868, he met Corbin Cooley. Cooley heard Dr. Thorne's story and believed him. Cooley organized his own expedition to find the Lost Dutchman mine. Cooley organized a group from Phoenix and surrounding communities. When Cooley left Phoenix and headed east into the Superstitions with 267 men, one of those men was Jacob Walsh, the Dutchman. The expedition also failed to find gold. The expedition ended at Fort McDowell, where they all disbanded and headed home. The Dutchman did not go home. He re-outfitted and headed back into the Superstitions alone. Apache raids were feared and prevalent in the area, but the Dutchman thought he could better avoid conflict with Apache alone. The Dutchman prospected eastward through the Superstitions all the way to the present site of Globe. He had found nothing, so he headed back, traveling westward back to the Superstitions. He was attacked by a small group of Apache. The Apache ran his animals off. He spent several days hiding in caves from the Apache until he thought they were gone. He headed to Fort McDowell on foot. On the way, he came across an old trail that appeared to have had some use recently. He followed the trail into a camp. There was no one there. He waited there, and about dusk, 3 Mexicans came into camp. They were afraid of him, but he reassured them in Spanish that he was not a threat to them. The Mexicans said they were working a rich gold mine that their family had worked when that area was still part of Mexico. They were scared of the Apache because they only had 2 muskets. The Dutchman had a modern double-barreled breech-load shotgun with buckshot. They worked out a deal. The Dutchman could help them work the mine and help protect them from the Apache, and he would be paid well for this service. The next day, they took the Dutchman to see the mine. He described it as a narrow incline shaft, not too steep that someone could climb down. When the Dutchman climbed down and he saw the working face of the vein, it was an 18-inch vein of milk-white quartz with almost a third pure gold. The Dutchman was so shocked by this that he was not able to sleep that night when they got back to camp. He was nearly 60 years old. He looked for gold his whole life and had nothing to show for it. And he had just saw what he believed to be the richest gold mine in the world. He started thinking that this mine was in the hands of 3 Mexicans that had no legal right to the gold. He had convinced himself that even if the Mexicans had not been there, he would have surely found the gold himself. He believed that rightfully this mine should have been his, because he had spent his whole life in search of gold. He had decided what he would do. The next morning, the Dutchman and the Mexicans decided they needed supplies and were going to go to Fort McDowell for supplies. One of the Mexicans went to the mine, which was a good distance from the camp where they had permanent water. He would hide tools and cover the mine in case someone came by. When the other two Mexicans had their back turned, the Dutchman shot one of the Mexicans in the back. The other one turned around and he shot him in the chest. He hid and waited for the other Mexican. When the other Mexican returned, the Dutchman stepped out and shot the last Mexican in the back. He dumped their bodies down a deep ravine and set their burros loose and headed to Fort McDowell on foot. He had achieved the dream of his lifetime. He was now the sole proprietor of the richest gold mine in the world. He did not return that winter. He was worried about family members of the Mexicans he had killed might come looking and find him there. He returned to the mine the second winter. He worked the mine in the winters when there was water in those canyons. The third winter, when he returned to the mine, things were not as he had left him. Someone else had been working the mine. He ran into a prospector on the trail and killed him. Then the next winter, someone had still been working the mine. He ran into two soldiers that were carrying a dispatch. He killed them. And yet again, the next winter, someone else had still been working his mine. He had killed the wrong men. The man that was actually working the Dutchman mine was a man named John Phipps. Phipps died in an accident in Round Valley. He was digging out a well, and it caved in and trapped him in quicksand up to his waist. Men were trying to save him. He screamed at them that if they saved him, he would show them where the richest gold mine in the world was. The water overtook him, and he drowned. They left him there in the watery grave. The men there looked through his belongings to try to figure out who his family members were so they could notify them of what had happened. They found 2 1-pound baking powder cans completely filled with pure hand-carved wire gold. The Dutchman sent to Germany for his nephew, his sister's son, to help him come work the mine. The Dutchman and his nephew did not get along. They argued constantly. The nephew wanted to file a claim on the mine and work it openly. The Dutchman was afraid of this because of the way he acquired the mine. They were on their way back. They camped at Hitting Water in Cottonwood Canyon. That night, the nephew told the Dutchman that he didn't care what he thought, and that when they returned to Phoenix, he was going to file a claim. That night, the Dutchman said he killed him, shot him right between the eyes. The Dutchman said he put a chain around his neck and dragged him up by the base of the cliffs above the spring where the ground was soft, and he buried him in a shallow grave. The Dutchman made his last trip to the mine in 1884. He said he had taken out enough gold to last a lifetime on the western frontier. So he closed the mine. He went down about 6 feet. He enlarged a collar all the way around and put 2 solid layers of logs across each other, and then backfilled the surface with dirt and rocks from the surrounding area so it would all match. He said when he was done with it, you could drive a pack train across it and never know it was there. Now think about how hard something like that would be able to find after 130 years of erosion, something that was covered that well and hidden so well at the time. It could be a cactus or even a tree growing where the mine shaft once was. You could walk right by it, and I'm sure people have, and never know it. So anyway, that's a story that Clay Worth tells, and the way he tells it is that it's not his story, it's their story. He just happens to be somebody who's heard it directly from, I guess, fourth hand. And that's probably the most direct we can get from somebody that died in 1891. One of the men at his bedside, one of the two men at his bedside, was Dick Holmes. And Dick Holmes' son was born a year later. And Clay Worth was best friends with that guy later in life. So Brownie Holmes grew up knowing the story that was told to his father directly from the Dutchman. I don't think you can get any more direct than that. There's a lot of people that claim to know the story. A lot of people claim to have the map. Clay Worth don't even mention a map. And there's more to this story. I'm gonna get more into it in another video. I just thought this one was running kind of long, so I'll go more into possible locations and what he disclosed about where the mine was to the people that were present. But I started, I was kind of enthralled by this story when I was out there living with my dad when I was 16. This kind of story that kind of suck you in, gold, treasure, and all that. But after listening to some of the stuff, and I don't know Clay Worth, it's just doing some research and seeing the video of him talking about this, it just seems real credible. It's the first time, because I started thinking that maybe this wasn't true at all. Maybe it's just some story that got blown up over the years, a lot of hearsay. But this one, it kind of tracks it right to the person. It's fourth-hand information, but it still tracks. It's easily tracked, and you can kind of see where the most direct information probably is this story, I would think. So anyway, I hope you check out the video. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. I'm going to do another video that talks more about what the Dutchman conveyed about the location, and why I think there was a mine. There was 48.5 pounds of gold ore underneath his bed when he died, and some of that gold is known to still exist, and they've made stuff out of it and stuff. So he had gold. That's pretty evident. But and I think he had a mine. But I also think that no one would ever find it. And someone who had the most direct information, Dick Holmes, basically searched for it his whole life, and so did Clay Worth. But the way the Dutchman described that he hid it in such a way that no miner would be able to tell. And it could have a cactus or even a tree growing where it used to be, the way he filled it. So you could walk right by it and never know it. So anyway, I just think it's a real cool story. It's a legendary story, but I just trying to put my little take on it based on just reading and being just interested in this story. Obviously, I'm no expert at all, but I believe this is probably the most credible accounting of what the Dutchman. I mean, the Dutchman, he wasn't saying he was a great guy. I mean, I think he admitted in that story to killing 7 people in order to keep the gold. So anyway, please like, share, subscribe. Hopefully I'll get another video coming out soon, and let me know what you think. Thanks. Out.